Good afternoon, everybody, and it's nice to be here. What I'm going to do today is sort of run down for you some basic things about Maine Housing, who we are and what we do, and more importantly, sometimes what we're not. And then I'll be happy to take any questions that I can answer. If I can answer them, great, and if I can't, I will make sure I get back to you the proper answer to any questions that you have. So let's go right ahead. First of all, Maine Housing, who we are. We are an independent quasi-state agency. So Maine Housing is not a agency of the state. We are set up by statute. We're over 50 years old, and we were created out of the Lyndon Johnson era Great Society of federal programs to help people with their housing needs. Our mission here is listed on the, oops, is that okay? Sorry. We're really three things in one. We are a bank. We're a $2.5 billion bank. We're very large. We'd be the fourth or fifth largest bank in the state. And what we do there is we make mortgages for first-time home buyers. We do that through a network of banks and mortgage companies that do the work on the front end, and then they turn around, they make the mortgage, then they sell us the mortgage. We use tax-exempt bond proceeds to purchase those mortgages, and that's how we work as a bank. We also are an administrator, a program administrator of federal funds and some state funds, all having to do with various things around housing, like rental assistance and home repair and weatherization and fuel assistance and all of our homeless shelters, several $100 million a year and dozens of federal programs that we administer. And we use a network of partners and agencies to help us do that. And then we're also a public housing authority. Many of you might be in municipalities that have a public housing authority. That's called a local municipal public housing authority. We're the public housing authority for the rest of the state, the balance of the state. So if you think of a piece of Swiss cheese, each one of the local 25 or so public housing authorities is a hole in that cheese. They get their own jurisdictions, and then Maine Housing has the rest of the state. Now, one thing that occurs to me as I talk to you is I can't see anyone. And I do like to take questions as I go, but I have no ability, I think, to see that. So maybe if Matt or anybody else kind of wants to prompt me if there's a question out there, I'll stop at any time. When we talk about affordability, what does that really mean? So what it really means in our world is that the household is paying 30% of its income or less on its housing needs, is really where if you're in that situation, then you are not, you don't have any pressures on making your housing needs met. 30% of your income should go towards your housing, no more than that. If you're paying more than that, and too many people are, then that's what Maine Housing is in business to try and address. So, for example, your teacher making $40,000 a year, just distilling that down, $12,000 a year, $12,000 is 30%, $1,000 a month. Who has housing for $1,000 a month, right? So what we do is we create programs, we use our financial ability to create affordable housing. So one area that we are very active in is multifamily development. The various programs there involve the low-income housing tax credit. This is the federal effort to provide low-income housing in the United States today. Maine Housing receives an allocation of these credits from the IRS, from the federal government. We sometimes competitively and sometimes not get those credits in the hand of a developer, multifamily developer, and then the developer takes those credits and sells them to investors for cash. And we call that equity that comes into a transaction. And depending on the type of tax credit we use, there's a 4% tax credit, there's a 9% tax credit. It can cover between 30 and 70% of the total development costs of a building. So what this really does is it drives down the need for a paying mortgage on an apartment building. Sometimes we can get very, very low. Sometimes we can have no mortgage at all. And therefore, the owner is able to accept lower rental income because their debt service and their expenses to run their property are lower. And that's how you achieve the affordability with the low-income housing tax credit. I start there only because that is the biggest program that we have, and it kind of dominates a lot of what we are doing. For those of you following, the House of Representatives this week in Congress passed the tax bill, and now that goes over to the Senate. In that tax bill is a restoration of 12.5% for our low-income housing tax credit program that will allow Maine Housing to immediately take one or two projects off of a waiting list and actually tell the developer to go ahead and build that building. That's something we've been fighting for quite some time, and we're very excited about that. We just got to now we have to have the Senate step up and do that. We have other non-tax credit development programs. One of them that you may have heard that is very popular right now is the Rural Affordable Rental Housing Program. And this was created by Governor Janet Mills initially with an allocation to us under the Maine Jobs and Recovery Act program. And these were federal funds that came to the state that the governor directed to Maine Housing. And, you know, we were talking about the tax credit program a minute ago. That's a pretty complicated program. You gotta hire lawyers and be really sophisticated in knowing what you're doing with that. And not all developers are in that boat. They don't want to have that as a business model. So we come out with a rural affordable rental program, which is a little bit simpler program for smaller projects, 5 to 18 units, that serves people at 80% of area median income. I failed to mention the tax credit program only goes up to 60% of area median income. So we can serve a little bit higher income band with this program. The rents are restricted at 80. The income limit is restricted at 80. And these rents and income limits are published by the federal government. And if we don't like them, we can yell back to the federal government, hey, we want you to change these up. But for the most part, it's what drives our programs, and we follow those federal limits. And you can use this program for new construction, acquisition rehab, and adaptive reuse. So you can take an existing building that was not affordable apartments and rehab it into affordable apartments. The adaptive reuse is taking an old mill or a school or an old office building and turning it into a new use for housing. And we take a deed restriction for 45 years on all these projects that we finance. That goes for the tax credits as well, so that we are assured that for the period of time, the right people are being served and they're not paying more than they should in rent. We do have a program for developers called the Short-Term Real Estate Acquisition Program. These are primarily for public housing authorities and community action agencies and nonprofits. Because the market out there is pretty tight, and when a viable, attractive property goes on the market, it's very, very competitive, and our partners need to move quickly. And this program gives them the capital they need to move quickly in order to pick up a property that they might want to do something with down the road. And we hope it kind of levels the playing field. And it hasn't had too much use. It's had a little bit, but we think it's an important tool for particularly municipal housing authorities and local agencies to be able to react to. As you see the rate there, it hasn't changed, 5%. I don't think it's changed. It hasn't been used that much, so I still think we're at 5% on that program. So that's the multifamily side of our business. We also have single family programs. And one of them, actually, my Eric Jorgensen, who runs my governmental affairs, was just over at the Housing Committee giving an overview of this program. Again, this is all about now creating starter homes, if you will. That's really the gist behind this. And out of that same pot of money, the Maine Jobs and Recovery Act, Governor Mills sent over some money to us to take a program that we had many years ago, back in the early 2000s, when before the Great Recession hit, before the upheaval in the single family market in 2008, 2009, 2010. But what we're talking about here is we look for developers. We provide them a resource to subsidize $70,000 per unit, or 60, depending on where the project is, basically to lower the overall capital cost of creating a subdivision, or it could be a condo. And the whole deal is, in return for this subsidy, you're going to build the home. It's going to be energy efficient. It's going to be very cheap to run. It's going to be basic starter home, and make it available for people at or below 120% of area median income. That's the same income population that we serve through our first-time homebuyer program. We do have maximum home prices of $325 or $287, depending on where the home is. And on that program, we take an affordability covenant for 15 years. So we probably have anywhere from 6 to 8 to 10 projects right now that are going through this program. And the governor, when she released her supplemental budget earlier in the week as part of her State of the State, has $10 million more for us in this program. And we'll see if that gets through the legislative process. I talked about our mortgage programs. Really, the flagship program of Maine Housing is our first home loan program that we buy about 1,000 loans a year from a network of 40 banks. We're always able to keep our interest rate on this program well below market rate. So for example, right now, our first home loan program is at 5.99, 30-year fixed. Market's about 6.50, 6.75. And we're always able to keep that spread. We also offer down payment and closing cost assistance, and we use a fund that is very dear to us here at Maine Housing. We call it the Home Fund. Really what it is a portion of Maine's real estate transfer tax that is collected on every every property sale in the state. And a good portion of that money comes to us, and we give that out in the form of a down payment grant of $5,000 to help people overcome the down payment closing cost hurdle. And then recently this year, because of the massive disparity between people of color and not in the state of Maine on home ownership, for example, Black home ownership rates in Maine is less than 30%, while in the rest of the state, it's over 70%, just inexcusable. So we're trying to, not only for African Americans, but all people of color who have not had anyone in their family own a home in their history. They're the first generation of their family to own a home. We help them with enhanced down payment and closing cost, a lower fixed interest rate, and then we also provide financing for mobile homes. Speaking of mobile homes, we have too many mobile homes in our state that are in serious need of replacement. And so we provide some financing to help that occur. We have a program that is funded both at the state and national level called Community Aging in Place. This is all about keeping seniors in their homes in a safe environment. Really basic modifications that you can make to a home to keep it safer, to keep people living at their home, not having to leave their home as they age. And then we also have program for single family, because Maine has such a high home ownership rate, and we have one of the oldest housing stocks. That means that there's a lot of homes out there in need of repair. And the Home Accessibility and Repair Program provide grants for significant repairs and also emergency life safety issues. And these two programs, Community Aging in Place and the Home Accessibility and Repair Program, are delivered through a network of community action agencies and public housing authorities, and even one Habitat for Humanity. We're always looking to expand the population of partners that help deliver the programs that we have. I'm going to talk a little bit about subsidized housing. And when I talk about subsidized housing, I want to stop for a second and draw the distinction between what is subsidized housing and what is rent-restricted housing. Two different terms. Sometimes you hear them interchangeably, but there's a significant difference. Subsidized housing is when the federal government helps pay a portion of someone's rent. And below market housing, which is really what we create with the tax credit program and the rural rental program, that is rent-restricted housing, which means the rents that are charged in those buildings are below the market rent and they're restricted, but the person living in those units is responsible for the full amount of rent. Subsidized housing is when the federal government helps pay a portion of that. So you've all heard of the Section 8 program, which is also called the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Maine Housing administers about a third of the housing choice vouchers in the state, and the others are administered by Maine's 25 public housing authorities. I say 23 housing authorities, I say 20, I say 25. There's a few of them, like MDI has 5 housing authorities under one umbrella. Brunswick and Topsom have 1 housing authority or 2 housing authorities under one umbrella. So you'll sometimes hear 20, 23, 25. At Maine Housing, 60% of these vouchers go to people who are homeless. Again, our 1/3 share is about 3,800 vouchers. So there are a little under 12,000 vouchers in the state. About $116 million in total come into Maine through this program. There's a huge waiting list, over 20,000 people on the waiting list. It takes way too long to get a voucher. When you get a voucher, it's really hard to find an available unit. So we really work with landlords who want to participate in this program and incent them to rent their unit to someone in the voucher program. There's also historically, that doesn't exist anymore, but historically HUD used to fund what's called Section 8 project-based housing, and this ran from the mid-1970s into 1983 before it was stopped by the government. And Maine Housing would finance those properties, and the federal government would provide a 40-year contract to help pay the rents for the people in those units. Same deal as housing choice vouchers. 30% of the person's income would go towards their rent, and the government would pick up the rest. And those 40-year contracts were coming up on their expirations, but even as they expire, the owners of these properties are incented by HUD to renew those contracts. And our office does a lot of those contract renewals, and we haven't lost any of this housing in the state. So we're very, very lucky in that regard. There are other types of housing you may come across in your communities and hear about. Rural development. Rural development is a different arm of the federal government than HUD. They're under the USDA, U.S. Department of Agriculture. And they also helped fund over almost 7,000 units, almost 300 properties in the state. And they gave 50-year 1% mortgages to private owners. Maine Housing does not really manage this portfolio. We may have had some of these 290 properties come to us for financing over the years, and we may have some oversight, but for the most part, this is a federally run and federally administered program. But what's happening here, and it's happening in some of your communities, I'm sure, those contracts, the owners can actually get out of those contracts. There's a very prescriptive way that they have to do notice requirements and other things. And from time to time, you'll hear one where the owner may not have done the right things that they should. And in those cases, we try and preserve those as much as we can. We work very closely with the Genesis Community Loan Fund. Genesis is out of Brunswick. They are a CDFI, a Community Development Financial Institution, and they have a contract with Rural Development to provide technical assistance to owners who want to either renew or they might want to sell their home, sell their properties to other nonprofits. Another area that Maine Housing is very involved with is supportive housing, which basically means people who have certain mental, physical disabilities or handicaps, homeless citizens. We're very active in this area, trying to provide very unique types of housing that typically community or commercial banks can't provide. We work with a whole group of nonprofit service providers, and we're really trying to always encourage more development in this particular area. So, a lot of information there, a very high-level overview. I will look to stop sharing my screen so I can see faces. And like I said, I just covered a lot of information. I hope I didn't overwhelm you. But I will be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Let me kick off the first question, Dan.
Sure.
We're doing a series of sub-regional meetings as part of the Housing Opportunity Program for housing planning in our region. And one of the things that keeps coming up, and I know it's a conversation you and I had earlier some ways back, was trying to create an incentive program for accessory dwelling units. And I was wondering, I heard some talk about that being developed on the state basis, so we slowed up our process, and I'm kind of wondering what's going on. For those of you that don't realize it, or one of the problems we ran into in trying to create the program was that to provide a grant for Maine Housing, typically what happens is there's a 0% forgivable loan attached to it, which becomes a lien on the property. And we immediately ran into problems with folks that have existing mortgages would have difficulty getting that approved by their primary bank. Is that a fair statement, Dan?
Yeah, and so let me just say that the work that was done to bring the ability to create accessory dwelling units was really a step in the right direction for the state of Maine. And we were happy to be part of those working sessions and those groups and passing that legislation. So one of the things, however, is, as Matt said, when you begin to start to peel the layers back, it can get pretty complicated pretty quickly. And the other thing I'll say is the law that allows ADUs by right is not just an affordable housing issue. It's a housing inventory supply issue at all income levels. And so where Maine Housing's lane is really restricted to just the low income portion, we thought that it made a lot of sense to look to the commercial banking market or to the Finance Authority of Maine or to other types of market lenders to help try and figure this out. Because you could have a homeowner that is well above any income level that Maine Housing would ever serve looking to do an ADU. That's a good thing. We want them to do that. But maybe Maine Housing isn't the organization that they should go to do that. So it hasn't, as many of these things do, when you change a law, that's step number one. Then actually implementing that law and taking advantage of its full intent takes some time. And so as planners and folks in your municipalities and regional areas, my suggestion is keep the conversation going. Oftentimes you might be in a better position than I or us here at Maine Housing to advance this to where we want it to go.
Thanks, Dan. Questions?
I have a question.
Hi there, Kelly.
Yes. So I work for the town of Bar Harbor, and I was curious about the affordable home ownership program. And I believe you were saying that program is primarily geared towards developers for starter homes. And I was curious how much is this program has been used, and then if you have any examples of where this program has been used.
Yes. So I would say, we just gave this really great presentation, and what I think I'll do is send it over to whoever I should send it over to, because we're really proud of it. We just, gave it this morning. We started with $10 million, and we've, got a pipeline of, I want to say 8 to 10 projects, a couple of which are done. One of them is, in Hamden, which is somewhat close to where you are. We've got good geographic representation. There's a nice chart where we can show you where those all are and in various stages. There's a 20 units out of 120 in Wells, for example. There's some in Standish, and we're continuing to talk to developers. So where it stands right now is we're currently out of money, and the governor's put another $10 million into her supplemental budget. And in today's presentation to the Housing Committee, many members of the Housing Committee got very excited about this project, this program, because when you talk about building wealth and building equity, it's really through home ownership. And there seemed to be a real desire to, for example, Maine Housing last year through the legislature got $70 million of subsidy money, 35 million for our tax credit program and 35 million for our rural program. And one of the commenters at the hearing today said, maybe we should have given Maine Housing 70 million for the home ownership program, because that really has an impact. So I'm hoping that this program and momentum to fund this program will continue. By the way, you have a new public housing director in your area. I just had the opportunity to meet him. He comes with a wealth of knowledge and experience. I can't wait to work with him. But anyway, you're in good hands in the NBI area with your new Housing Authority director.
Awesome, thank you. And then you said that you would send that PowerPoint to anyone who wanted to see it.
We're also posting it on the Municipal Planning Assistance Program website. All of these trainings, the recorded webinars and the PowerPoints.
That reminds me, Judy, it'll probably take a day or so, but if any of you are interested to go on to the Joint Select Committee on Housing's website, by tomorrow, you should be able to see the recording of today's presentation to the committee by a couple of my staff, and you'll be able to actually see it there as well.
Great.
Yeah.
We can reference that. Thank you.
Dan, one of the questions here is anyone getting data on how many ADUs are being built and what those are? And I know this morning we had that discussion, and Bath and Brunswick are actually tracking that for us. So we're going to begin to collect that information. Is anybody doing that on a statewide basis? It's hard.
Not that I'm aware of. I think the municipal approach might be the most effective, because there might be tools at municipal level disposal that that might be more challenging. So I don't think so. I'm not aware of that.
Okay. I think that's something regional councils could probably do a better job with anyways.
I think so. The other thing I should have mentioned, which was kind of a big deal last October, we released a probably the most comprehensive housing needs analysis that we've done in a decade in Maine. And it's a very thorough, deep dive into what the actual housing need is in Maine through the lens of having enough housing units for where our workforce will be, where we anticipate our workforce needs will be. So we need to have, you know, we're about 37,000 units short today of what we should have. And in order to get where we need to go, we need another 30,000 or 35,000. It's about 80,000 in total by 2030. And it's not about just building the units, it's where you build the units and in what communities do you build the units. And this is beyond just affordable housing. It's more how many total units at all income levels. And I think would be a great resource for any of you. That report's out on Maine Housing's website. And I can provide a link to that as well.
Judy?
Sorry, I was looking for that link and whatever I was going to say went right out of my head. It'll come back. Keep going.
Other questions?
Yeah. Hi, Ann.
Hey, Bangor is working on new zoning for co-living, which is kind of like a dorm for grown-ups. And we've also brought back boarding houses to our code as a way to provide another method of housing that is affordable. And I do have, excuse me, a couple of developers that are interested in that, and would in the future, with information, and we can give you all of our information, would there ever be a consideration of subsidizing that type of use?
Yeah, so with regard to boarding houses, or the terminology I think of as single room occupancy.
Right.
The answer is yes. The challenge there is making the numbers work with costs today so crazy, but we would always be interested in talking with developers on that. We wouldn't necessarily run a program for that, but we would, through our existing programs, if a developer wanted to do an SRO, we would absolutely listen to them and see if see if that works. The shared living is new to me at like a dorm for adults kind of approach. That's a little bit new to me. But what I will say is we've been actively working with a group called Nesterly on senior home sharing. So this is a really neat idea that has been successfully done in other states. So what Nesterly does is it's almost like it's a matching service, right? I mean, it's not a dating site, but it's the same fundamental concept where an organization will provide a forum for people who have homes and space in their homes and are looking for someone to come live with them, maybe rent a room in exchange for rent or exchange for whatever. And it's a vetting between people who have the desire to do this and people who want to avail themselves. And clearly safety, security, all that kind of stuff is what Nesterly provides. And so we're going down a path of trying to foster this in the state of Maine, see if it's something that takes hold. Vermont has been very successful with it. We think we could do something here in Maine. So it's another type of sharing. When you said home share or sharing, that's what jumped into my head too.
Right. Thank you.
Welcome.
Dan, that a bit of that conversation, are you still running your community partnership programs? I'm forgetting the technical name of that.
So we had a community solutions grant program. And we've stopped doing that primarily due to the where the Department of Economic and Community Development has stepped up after the passage of LD 2003. And particularly with the folks over at DECD under Commissioner Johnson, Ben and Lucy have really reached out, and with some funding that the legislature has provided, has been a resource for municipalities in helping think through and plan what municipalities want to do. So we were in that relationship with municipalities for a few years, just trying to float that out there. We did a few deals, I think, in your previous life, Matt, we pulled off a nice one.
Mhm.
But now that DECD has funding, it's more in their wheelhouse. And our funding is actually, we had a lot of one-time money that's drying up. So we had to make some decisions there to move in a different direction.
Okay. I have an interesting question here, Dan. What key metrics would you use or recommend, I suppose, if you wanted to track progress on how a community is doing on providing affordable housing?
I think the first thing I would suggest is that the community go through a process of establishing what its needs are and what it wants to accomplish. And I think honestly, so much of this I think is going to be done at the community level. And those metrics should be set by the community. So in some cases, it might be more than just units built. It might be types of units built or what you're looking to do in your particular community. So it's really hard to say there's one metric or a series of metric, particularly from someone like me at a state level, when I know that the metric in Bangor might be very different than the metric in Bar Harbor, even though they're very close to each other geographically. The communities are very, very different. And so honoring the local community level planning process, Maine Housing would look to support and provide whatever guidance or data we have. But I think most of that's at a local level.
So there's a question here, Dan, about your affordable housing index, which a lot of us use now, and try to work it into more local level snapshots. Can you talk a little bit about that? And
Yeah.
we're all kind of waiting for an update on the rental data.
I know. So we have two indices that we've had for many years, called the Home Ownership Affordability Index and the Rental Affordability Index. And the basic premise behind these is a data set that will really over time and show trending of whether a particular area is does the median income cover the cost of the median rent, or does the median income cover the cost of a median priced home? And if you're greater than 1.0, then in general, your area has affordability in it. There's options. And if you're below 1.0, then you don't. And so for many years, we've watched as the Home Ownership Affordability Index used to be that the southern areas of Maine and the coast were not affordable, but the interior and northern sections were. Well, that's changed. Like the whole state now, you can't buy the median income can't buy the median priced house because, of course, the median sale price of homes has just gone through the roof. On the rental side, we have been challenged in the last several years to get a data set that we think is reliable enough, because it used to rely on some methodologies. Matt, you probably know better than I what they were, because you might have even done them when you're here. But the update on that is one of the things I did this past year is I really beefed up our planning and research department. I have a department head. His name is Johnny Kursfeld. Johnny is a PhD economist. I stole him from Bates College, and Johnny wanted to get out of the academic world and into the housing world, which we're super excited about. And we're giving Johnny the resources and team members he needs to really be a better resource all around. And so they've done some research, and I can't off the top of my head articulate who, but he has found a data source and a data set that he likes and has presented it to me as a way to get back in the game of providing all of you data on rental affordability. Off top of our head, we know that rental affordability just doesn't exist in the state of Maine. But to what degrees and to where and to how and how much, it's really important to get to that level. So I'm hoping that we can get back to where we were and have a good rental affordability index in the coming months.
And I'll share that we did Johnny was very helpful in helping us get down to a more grassroots local level with your data and bringing it down to a smaller scale.
Yeah. Yeah, very appreciative of that too. When communities come back to us with research they've done, it just enhances everything. And so the more we can help communities and municipalities get to that, I think that's good teamwork.
Kaylee.
So I have a question about the short-term real estate acquisition program. So
Yeah.
there's kind of two questions to my question, I guess. So Bar Harbor has been talking about that previous year-round family rentals have been going up for sale, and then someone buys them and they haven't been using for year-round families and something else. So I guess my first question is, could someone use this program to maybe buy up those apartments? But my question is there like a limit to like a 120% of the AMI, or are there certain caps, or is there no cap for?
So the idea would be typically I think of public housing authorities or community action agencies. So that would be Down East Community Partners or MDI Housing, and or any other nonprofit really, because what we're trying to do is give the nonprofits an even playing field with the for-profits. The idea is they would have a vision of doing something within the scope or framework of the mission of Maine Housing to provide housing opportunities. And they just haven't figured it out yet, but they got to grab that piece of property and get it under contract and get ownership of it to hold it. And that's really what we're trying to do. The idea being, if we succeed in giving them, say, a short-term 2-year loan, they're able to hold on to it, figure out what they want to do, and maybe come into one of our other programs to actually create that housing. Or they might decide after a while, you know what, I'm not going to carry this anymore. They'd go ahead and release it, sell the building, and pay the loan back. That's really what we're trying to do there is not lose opportunities for the future, but not necessarily have to have an idea fully baked by the time they come in.
Charlotte, did you have a?
Yeah, relating to an earlier when we were talking about kind of the data side of things, a question that we get a lot from our municipalities is short-term rentals. And I do a lot of data for MCOG, and we have a data source, but I didn't know if Maine Housing has, any plans in your data work for to include short-term rental data.
Yeah, we did take out a subscription with AirDNA. Yeah. And as you might know, if you know AirDNA, it's not a true reflection of all short-term rentals. It's certain types of short-term rentals. It's I think the best, data set we know out there, but we know it's not complete. What I will say is that short-term rentals by themselves are not necessarily, you can't necessarily say that short-term rentals are the cause of all the state's woes. I do believe in certain communities it's a really big deal, but in other communities not a big deal at all. And so that doesn't mean that in those communities where it's a big deal, it's not something, but it's hard to come up with a state level approach on something that is such a local issue. So what we try and do is figure out, can we be of assistance in that local area? Because we're also balancing that in many places, short-term rentals are small business opportunities for people to stay in their own affordable homes. So you have the sense of a single, small mom and pop type operation just trying to make ends meet, and that seems pretty harmless and okay. And then you have other cases where you have, companies coming in and buying up properties, and maybe that's not okay. There's so many shades of gray on the issue of short-term rentals. But I would encourage any of you to reach out to Johnny on our team, Johnny Kursfeld, because he loves this stuff too. And we would certainly be able to help you out as best we can.
Yeah, because I think the most helpful thing, because we have Air DNA as well, but knowing where the short-term rentals coincides with the, or kind of overlaps with the seasonal rentals, and maybe it's a long-term rental most of the time, and knowing that's really, I think, the lack in the data is knowing where they overlap with other types of housing as well. And I think we can glean so much more from our communities if we had that too. But I agree, it's a complicated issue and varies from town to town. So thank you.
Thanks. I'll come to you, Judy, in a second. This is a loaded question for you, Dan. I like asking you this. When you use median income for rents, is it based on family with 2 incomes, a married couple?
Oh, goodness. I haven't been at that level in so long. That's a hard question for me to answer accurately because I just don't live in that level of that world anymore. I thought you were going to say something about Theo Epstein being back with the Red Sox now, but
yeah, but he's an owner. He's an owner. Yeah, it is. I think the important thing is it's a complicated question. It's not a simple answer.
Yeah, it is. I don't mean to make light of the question, but if there is clarity that Maine Housing can provide you or the group on a particular question, we'll be happy to receive it. I'll get it in the right hands to get the best answer out there.
Judy.
Just going back to CDBG days, I thought it was household income and MHI, so I would include both incomes. So I didn't think it was that complicated, but maybe I'm oversimplifying. And I did remember what I was going to say before, and it relates to Charlotte's question on short-term rentals. Just to give you a possible approach here, the Land Use Planning Commission has had issues with short-term rentals, some extremely hot in certain communities. And what they have just done is they've changed their rules to around both short-term rentals and accessory dwelling units. And if I get this, I think I have this correctly. Accessory dwelling unit or an accessory unit is allowed, but subject to standards. So it's like a permit by rule. And so that is just whether it's a short-term rental or not. But the change that LUPC has made with short-term rentals is a requirement for self-verification by property owners if you have one. And the way they're going to achieve that is to send out a notice annually with the tax bills, and it goes to it's something like 22,000 different addresses, with a requirement that over a certain period of time, you need to self-report that you have, whether you have a short-term rental or not. And it's their way to assemble the database. So it might be something that individual towns could replicate. And I can get the, if anyone's interested, I can follow up and get the language in the rule that they've proposed. I think it's either proposed or just passed. I think it's just passed. You can check on that, and just what kind of paperwork they're going to use.
Thanks, Judy. We had that same exact conversation in a small town last night. Same thing. Is there a way to go about doing that? Because that's what municipalities are worried about, is tracking that. Dan, in the context of planning, do you have an idea or program that you would be most excited about towns and regions helping Maine Housing achieve their goal? What would be one area you would focus on, right? Particularly right now.
Oh boy, that's a tough one. I will say that this rural affordable rental program has really taken off in a way that, like I mentioned earlier, sometimes you get a new law or you get something, takes a few years for it to take off and really run the way you want it to. We were oversubscribed in this program from the minute we put it on the street. And we also, with this new amount, we got 17 and a half, we got 35 million, we got 17 and a half each year. We received 16 applications for 45 million in requests. So we're like 3 or 4 to 1 oversubscribed. These are opportunities that are in every community, particularly small, you know, a big tax credit deal is not going to go in every community in Maine. And the vast majority of communities in Maine are small. So I think that there are opportunities there. And you know, just interacting with developers or people who are interested in providing housing in your communities and hearing them out. What's important to them, what makes your community attractive to develop in is a great way to, you know, because, you know, municipalities hold so much power, in my opinion, when it comes to, I'm not saying that's a bad thing either, but it's truth. Local planning boards and local municipal officials really do can influence dramatically the development desire in a particular town or community. And I think the more active and educated you are at your level on who we are and all the various tools that are out there. You know, I mentioned Ben and Hillary before. I mean, the work that they're doing really to advance some resources for municipalities is super helpful. So that there might be a better answer there, but that's the one that comes to mind.
Thank you, Dan. And, you know, to come back to your point, you know, it makes me nervous that Theo Epstein now is part owner of the Red Sox. It's brought us to the end of our hour. Are there any other final questions, Dan? Would you like to, that statement was a really good summary. I think it's very accurate as to what we should be doing as planners, either on a regional or local level.
Yeah, no, I thank you very much. I love talking to any group I can get in front of about who we are and what we do. You know, the environment right now for our business and our work has never been better, both at the federal and state level. So we're just trying to key on that momentum. It used to be that a few years ago, MaineHousing was financing 250 units of multifamily housing a year. Last year, we did over 780. We're going to do 750 plus again this year. So anyway, thank you very much for having me, and I'll be happy to come back anytime.
Thank you, Dan.
Take care.